Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee to order. Welcome, everyone. Please remember to silence your cell phones. You would. So unlike me with the meeting this morning, you won't get the call in the middle of the meeting. But it was from the mayor. Any public comments? Any public comments? Any public comments? If not, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from the March 8th meeting. What are your wishes? They were in the packet. Moved by Leahy, seconded by Fisher to approve. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries. Supervisor Zhang has indicated that he is running just a little bit late and will be joining us, so all members will be present. Without objection, I'd like to take up item 5A5, consideration of potential transfer of property, specifically PIN 2512707284999 to the city of Mosinee. Administrator Leonard, are you going to lead this discussion and then turn it over to Administrator Gates?
Sure, I can. Thank you, Chair Robinson. We did receive a request, and I do understand Administrator Gates from Mosinee is on the call. A request from the city of Mosinee relative to a piece of property that remains a remnant parcel, I guess is the best way to describe it, within the business park. And it has some significance to the city relative to some stormwater obligations they have. And therefore, Administrator Gates reached out and wanted to inquire whether or not the county would be interested in transferring that piece of property to the city. And there are a couple pieces of information within your packet, but I think probably the best way to proceed is to turn it over to Administrator Gates. Jeff, are you on and able to?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
We can, and if at any point we can't hear you, we'll let you know. And right now, Christy is moving within the packet to page 154 of 162. That's the aerial photo that demonstrates the parcel we're talking about. But if you'd like to take over that presentation and kind of start with why the city is interested in obtaining that parcel, that would be great. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. The purpose between our interest in either obtaining the parcel is related to the city is in the process of updating our stormwater management plan that's required by the state for our stormwater permit. And under that process, we were identifying areas where stormwater drains into and is potentially treated. And this parcel was identified as part of that process. This parcel is located within the Central Wisconsin Business Park. For those on the committee that may not be aware, the Central Wisconsin Business Park was actually developed in a cooperative effort between Marathon County and the city back in the 1980s. And the county and the city jointly managed the park as far as making improvements to the park, as well as selling land in the park to businesses. Then in April of 1990, the city and county reached an agreement that the county would continue to receive proceeds from land sales in the park until such time that the county recouped all of its acquisition cost for buying the land for the park. If any of you are curious what that was, it was $550,000 according to the agreement. And then the agreement called for, once the county recouped all its costs through the land sales, all remaining vacant lots would be transferred to the city. In May of 1999, the county passed a resolution that acknowledged that the county's investment in the business park had been paid off in accordance with the agreement, and that therefore all the remaining vacant properties within the park would be transferred to the city. For some reason, this parcel was not part of the transfer. Don't know why it wasn't. But really our intent of reaching out to the county was in order for us to get credit for these drainage areas as part of our stormwater treatment, we either have to have one of two things in place. Either one, the city has to own the land so that we can prove that it'll be function as a stormwater treatment area, or two, we need to have a maintenance agreement with the property owner, which we are in the process of obtaining maintenance agreements for some of the properties in the business park that have stormwater ponds. So I reached out to Mr. Leonard to ask if the county would be wanting to transfer the parcel to the city. Again, I don't know why it wasn't back in 1999 or 2000. Or two, if the county wanted to retain the parcel, if you would be willing to sign a maintenance agreement with the city that this drainage area that's within the parcel would be maintained properly. I'll be happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Are there any questions for Administrator Gates? So the agreement should have resulted in the transfer of the property 23 years ago, but it didn't. So this is basically playing correction. So what are the wishes of the committee? Chair Gibbs.
I'll make a motion that we transfer that parcel as described in the packet to, with PIN number 251-2707-284-9999 to the city of Mosinee, consistent with the agreement, even though it was overlooked.
Moved by Gibbs, seconded by, we're going to give Fisher the nod today. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries. Now, this will need to go to the full board for approval at our meeting later this month. All right, then we'll go back up to item, you're welcome, and good luck. Item 4A, update relative to hiring practices to address Sheriff's Office staffing within Corrections and Communications Division. Bill?
This is Administrator Leonard. Captain Milhausen and I are going to tag team this a little bit. He'll probably take the lion's share, but just to frame the issue, this is just keeping an issue in front of you that we've talked about in more abstract terms in the past, but several standing committees have brought up, and certainly you're aware of the class comp study that we're doing, but it really is, it gives some specific examples of some of the issues we're having, the challenges we're having in terms of recruitment and retention. I should say that the other way, retention and recruitment. So I asked Bill to come to this committee. We're not doing anything in terms of practice changes that requires any action by the committee. That's why this is on the agenda today for an informational update. We're not increasing the maximum wage for any of the positions we're talking about in either dispatch or corrections. We're not reclassifying, any positions, but we are doing a number of things, both operationally in terms of trying to attract and trying to retain new individuals. But also, when we do bring someone into the organization, we're doing a couple things differently in terms of determining a starting wage, and we just wanted to make the committee aware of that. So I'll turn it over to Bill, and I think we can start by talking about just what are the challenges that we have in terms of shortages that we've experienced in both communications and then also within corrections, and then we'll talk about some of the things that we've done to remove barriers, I think is the first thing we'll start with, relative to kind of bringing new people into the organization.
Thank you, Administrator Leonard, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to come and give you guys an update as to where we are in the Sheriff's Office. It's no secret that we're extremely short in the Corrections Division and the Communications Division. To give you an idea, we're, as of last night, 14 short for corrections officers, and we're 9 short for emergency dispatchers. Those are crisis numbers, as I'm sure you can all imagine. It's 34% in one division and 30% in the other. So we're certainly feeling what everybody is in the employer field right now with trying to recruit people. And it's really difficult with where we have our starting wages compared to comparables and things like that. Some of the hurdles that we have found ourselves up against are things in the private sector that we can't compete with. Obviously, we require 24/7, 365 coverage, nights, weekends, and holidays. And we've got competitors in the private market that are offering people to work 24-hour weeks, 32-hour weeks, and still get benefits. And we just can't compete with that. So some of the things that, some of the other things that we've, actually, I think that's pretty much where I'm at there for the, so the things that we've done so far to try and mitigate where we find ourselves and streamline our hiring processes and things like that, start with kind of something more recent that we just did. We've gone out and utilized an online tool called Interview Stream, which gives us the ability to do online pre-recorded interviews. So that gives us the opportunity. We've both did corrections and communications. We have, all right. We've had, we just went live with this, and it's really a nice tool for us to vet the applicants that we get without having to bring them in for the first initial vetting. We do get a rather large number of applicants anyhow in the communications division, but whether or not they're qualified, quite often they don't pass our background, just the initial assessment background, which is pretty rigorous to be CJIS compliant. So this interview stream is a tool for us to really get that first look at a candidate and to see if it's somebody that we want to move forward. I'm sorry, can't hear me? Guess I'll try and get closer, sorry. Is that better? All right. So some of the other things that we've done is obviously we've got a lot of overtime. So we had to implement something back a few years ago already and called overtime incentive pay. And we've had to do that to, both divisions work 12-hour shifts. So on an off week, I'll call it, their short week, they work 6.25 hours under the 40. So the way their current pay structure was is they did not get compensated at time and a half for those first 6.25. It was straight time. So it was really difficult to get somebody to come in and work for straight time on an off day when they're already getting worked a lot. So the county I worked with back when Frank Mattel was here, I worked with him, Jail Administrator Ledoux and I did, and we came up with overtime incentive pay. And that has helped, but it has not relieved. People are still getting forced to work 16-hour shifts in the corrections division. In the communications division, we've been fortunate enough that people are signing up for the overtime, but then that is getting felt and noticed by the county when it comes to looking at overtime budgets, obviously. We've created power shifts to try and overlap in the busy times of the afternoons or evenings to try and offset that work because both divisions are oftentimes operating at or below minimum staffing. And just to put that in perspective, communications has not been at 5 people for minimum staffing since 1990, and that's currently where we find ourselves 32 years later. And obviously our number of calls and the type of calls are substantially more involved and much more lengthy. The jail has done things like a STAR program, which is a program by which, because I just told you people are getting forced, it's a way that people they get a STAR in the beginning of the year, and at some time during the year, if they've got something personal going on and it's their turn to get forced, they can, so to call, play the jail to get out a free jail card or the STAR card, and they get passed. They can re-earn STARs by working another 100 hours of overtime. So that tells you the volume that people are having to work in our facility to maintain these things. But it has been a program that gives people something to work towards because obviously if you're continually getting forced, it's a way out. And if you're a low person on a seniority, sometimes you find yourselves in that situation a lot. The other thing that we've had to do in the corrections division is call-in pay for same-sex staff or for inmates. The female ratio is obviously, we drop below a certain number, we're required to have so many female jailers when we, working at a particular time. So if we find ourselves in a situation where we're running low on female staff, that's primarily where we see this playing in, is that we have to go and see if there's some people willing to be on call in case another female were to call in sick or whatever, not be able to come in. We need somebody that we can get in here. So we're offering that at a pay rate of $2.25 an hour to keep them on standby, if you will. It's not something that we've had to do a lot, but it is something that we've had to do because of where we find ourselves in our staffing crisis. And then you guys are all probably very much aware of the fact of what's taken place with the Secure and the Juvenile Detention Center, where we've had to relocate. We closed that down and relocated the staff here to the adult facility, and that was in an effort to try and augment the staffing here. And the numbers I gave you, those that were short, the 14, that's counting the staff that came back here. So we're still short that many.
Perfect. So Bill gave you a really good understanding of the challenges we have and a lot of the things we're doing to fix it. I'll be really short on the next steps. And then we'll have you guys give us some questions. So in the immediate term, what Administration and Employee Resource asked Captain Milhausen and Sandra to look into was, what are other counties doing? Where are we relative to other counties? Because we needed to have a good handle on where we are right now to make some quick changes. And the quick change that, based on the information that was pulled together, was that we're going to essentially bring people in further into the range, which we already have the authority to do under our employment policies because we do have that short-term need. That is where we're moving right now. We're going to start bringing people in at that higher rate. The good news is, and we were heading in this direction before, is we do have that class compensation study well underway. In fact, we have a kickoff meeting with that consultant happening very, very shortly, and we will get a much better handle on where we want to be based on pay philosophy in not only the sheriff's office, but across the organization. So hopefully we don't have these issues moving forward. But the short answer is, we're not asking for any approval here today, but we are just keeping you informed. We're bringing people in at a higher rate because, as Captain Milhausen said, right now we had to make some tough operational decisions, some of them easy. I think the interview stream software, that's great. We're continuing to remove barriers to make that onboarding process, that recruiting process easier to bring people into the organization. But some of the other things we've had to do are a bit painful. Reallocating the staff from the secure juvenile facility did cause some operational impacts within our social services department, also other county partners that have used that facility. But when you look at it, dollars and cents, if we have one Marathon County juvenile in that facility, and we have the Marathon County staff that we need to have there that can also be reallocated to the jail to keep us from having to house out inmates, because that's the thing that we would need to do. If we don't have the correct staffings, what Sandra would be doing would be getting on the phone with a lot of our friends in neighboring counties and asking if they have any room at the inn, and that's expensive. So we tried to make those operational decisions, but the long-term fix is going to have to be continuing to remove those barriers, but then also making sure that we're up at a place in the market where we can be externally competitive. And I think based on the information that Captain Milhausen, Sandra, Chad, that they all brought, I think we're going to find out from those consultants that we do have some opportunities to make some changes there. But just keeping you informed, the reality is this is not unique. The sheriff's office is kind of an acute place right now within the county, but challenges with respect to recruiting, retention and recruiting, they're not unique. I just had a meeting this morning with Jim Griesbach from the highway. We've had the similar meetings with other departments. Molly takes those phone calls all the time. But this was a good opportunity, I thought, to be before you today and just give you that information. So at this point, happy to take any questions.
Are there any? Chair Gibbs.
Well, thank you for that update, and I totally appreciate the extent that you're looking at trying to provide different options for our employees, and totally understand why we have to go to a higher wage scale penetration. but that also creates additional challenges or additional potential discrepancies with current staff. Are we going to be addressing those staff initially when we're increasing penetration on new hires?
Yes, sir. We have looked at that, and obviously, we don't want to put new hires above people who have given us a number of years of service. So that has been factored into how we will adjust some of the wages going forward.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions? Not, I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more about the compensation study, your efforts and others, but thank you for that update.
Chairman Robinson, I just want to let you know that Supervisor Jean is on and has been on.
All right, thank you. All right, that'll take us to workday update. So you're back on. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Chair Robinson. I'll be very brief, and then if you have questions, I will turn it over to the people that know far more about this project. But within your packet, specifically beginning on page 9, there's a 2-page handout that summarizes the agenda item that is before you, really just bringing you up to speed on where we are in the implementation, as well as a couple of issues we're going to be working through. Short, most important information up front. We are currently on track and on budget for the project, and as is alluded to in the first line in this memo, this is the largest software project that has been undertaken by the county, and it's a credit to staff that they've been able to maintain a timeline that is extremely aggressive. And when you think about it, and you'll see on the second page what that has meant, when you think about the breadth of this project, it's really a credit to our individual people within each of our teams in finance and in employee resources. And if you take a look at the first paragraph on the second page, we are a fair amount through the project, but in that 14 weeks, the last 14 weeks, they've dedicated over 1,000 hours to EnerSource resource planning meetings, 289 hours to workday training, and 454 hours of uncompensated time, because again, these individuals are putting in time above and beyond the 40-hour work week to move this project forward. So I wanted to make you aware of really the dedicated staff we have, and also answer any questions you have about the project. But the memo really does a great job. Molly and Christy put that together. But keeping this in front of you, we will be addressing, one of the things on the agenda is how do we make sure that we're compensating those employees and keeping them working on this project, retaining them. We're again not going to be asking for any action by this committee. We already have policies in place within the county that allow for those recognition programs and policies. But we're going to be looking at that, because when I look at those numbers and I walk down the hall and on the administration side and see employee resources staff, I know they're putting in a great deal of time, energy, and effort. And I wanted to bring that to this committee, just to, again, to keep you informed. You've asked to be kept informed of this project, but really a credit to our staff. So with that, happy to take any questions, and I would turn those over to Molly and Christy, and certainly Molly, Christy, if you guys have anything else you want to add at this point, feel free to do it.
I have a question, because when we started talking about this whole integration system, we talked about the possibility of hiring additional staff to free up staff for the conversion and the design and others. Have we done that? And if not, will we be burning? What efforts are we making to ensure that we don't burn people out and have a similar problem to what's going on in law enforcement with others? Because you can only expect people to work so much. So have we looked at replacing some of those functions? And if not, how are we tracking morale and burnout?
Sure, Molly can come up and answer that about.
No, you go right first. Yes.
But the short answer, yes, we have brought on some additional staff.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. We have brought on some additional staff. However, the complexity of our current processes have not allowed for those staff to get necessarily up to speed as quickly as we would have initially hoped. We actually have lost some of the temporary staff that we hired on and have done some duplicate recruiting. As you've heard earlier today, recruiting is difficult, and that is true for all types of work, particularly limited term employment, as there's, really no guaranteed for continued employment after the project ends. So we haven't been as successful with that as we had initially set out to be, although we do have a few limited term employees that have been extraordinarily value added to the process. As far as addressing staff burnout, that is an issue. As you see here, this 454 hours of uncompensated time, that is just donated time by staff, and it is getting to be a bit much. And we are working on a plan for addressing that, because continuity at this stage and through all the future stages of the project is really important. We can't afford to lose staff. But we don't have all the answers yet.
No, that was it. Even some of the additional staff are working.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody's putting in the time, effort, and energy to make this successful and make sure that we're carrying out our other duties outside of this project. And of course, the compensation and classification study that you've heard is also overlapping with this project and weighing on our department as well.
Have we seen any unforeseen problems that have arisen relative to the initial stages of implementation, or are we too early?
Right now, the project is on track in terms of timeline, budget, everything is looking good. I would say the biggest risk, the biggest threat we have is our staff and burnout.
Supervisor Fisher?
I would like to say thank you to all the departments that are putting in this work, as this project, once it's finished, is going to allow all those extra hours that are done doing paper forms to, so much more work is going to get done. My recommendation would be to any future board to, oh, sorry, yeah. Take it right here. My recommendation would be to any future board. Obviously, we cannot let this happen again. Standard upgrades, standard frequent upgrades need to be prioritized, because obviously at this point, all of this work and all these hours are going in because of the age of this software upgrade. So it would be irresponsible to let that happen again.
All right, any other questions? Vice Chairman McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This software, is this being used by other counties that already are using it?
Yes.
Okay, and they haven't had any issues down the road with it?
There are no Wisconsin counties that are using it, but the city and county, Denver County, along with the city of Denver, are using it in a similar nature that we are. And currently, the Tech NTC is currently implementing it as we speak. They should be done, I believe, July 1st of this year. So they have government experience, and they've been able to bring on, at least on the financial aspects, people that have been working either in governments or with them throughout the nation.
Thank you.
Chrissy, toward that end, is Baker Tilly and others, are they available as resources as they design the system?
Yes, and our auditors are as happy that we will be getting a new system as we are, as we do a lot of manual spreadsheets and provide them. So, yeah, and we ask them a lot of resource questions. They aren't able to do more due to the audit need, the neutrality on being an independent auditor, but they have been very helpful as well.
Any other questions? If not, thank you, and please communicate to the staff our appreciation for their efforts, and know that they are appreciated. And we apologize for, as Supervisor sure, our ostrich approach to the historic need to update our systems, and we have pulled our head out of the sand and recognize the need to go forward and appreciate all those efforts. With that, we'll go to the American Rescue Plan Act project submission update. It's your show.
Sure. In keeping with the narrative thus far, this will be brief. But again, to kind of close out this term of this committee, one of the big projects that you've been working on is really trying to come up with a rationale and a plan of action relative to ARPA spending. And we put together that process for submissions to come in, and that administration would compile those. So if you look to page 11 of the packet, there is a summary spreadsheet that does lay out the projects that have come in. You'll see it's separated into essentially a top portion and then the bottom portion, and then there's more of a summary table below. But the top portion of the table are those projects that you've already in some form or fashion approved with the dollar amount that was set forth in the approval. Now, some of those dollar amounts will be static. They're very clear. For example, the Uniquely Wisconsin Tourism Campaign, we know what that fixed cost is going to be for that project. The other some other projects are not. Most notably, the PTO balance liability reduction project, as well as the courtroom jail audio video enhancements. Those are really going to be dependent on, as it relates to the PTO balance project, how much that's utilized, and we'll have some final numbers for you very shortly. Similarly, the courtroom project will be dictated by the bids we get for those projects and the supply chain issues we need to navigate. But you'll see what you've already approved most recently. Again, the county board did approve a funding strategy relative to broadband, so we put the total dollar amount in there for that strategy. Below that are the pending projects that were recently submitted, both internally from departments within the county, as well as external entities outside of the county. And you'll see that the pending project total that we've received, 22 projects that were submitted for a total of slightly in excess of $19 million. Your approved project number already, the tentative dollar amount there is slightly in excess of $5 million. I will say I was surprised by the number of projects. 22 projects was more than I anticipated, but we did want to bring that summary information to you. One of the things that I think we'll need to address very quickly with the new constitution of this committee is what additional information you're going to be looking for in each of those applications, and then we'll need to find some staff capacity to bring that information to you. Because analogy here, we got a big first wave of projects. They didn't kind of come in terms of, hey, this is really the first quarter of the time that we have available for this spending. We didn't get a quarter of the projects. So you, essentially, if you approve all those projects, you're pretty close to your $26.3 million. So we're gonna need to find a way to deal with the staff need that I believe the committee is going to have for additional information. But not going to get into the details of each specific project request at this point. We're in the process within administration of kind of reviewing those and addressing what we see as glaring deficiencies or areas that we know the board is going to have a desire for additional information, and then we'll bring that back to you.
And again, one of the questions that we'll have to ask is, do we want to set some money aside for the future? Because we've got the two tranches, the initial tranche that we received last year, and we'll be receiving another tranche in a couple of months from the feds relative to the dollars, but we've got until the end of 2024 to commit those dollars and 2026 to spend them. So we'll have a number of policy discussions relative to how much money we want to allocate at this time. And I know that there are additional projects that are out there floating that will be coming in and requesting funding, whether it be childcare and or some opportunities to work with the Hmong American Center and others. So those are out as well. So with that, I think it's here more for information, just to keep you up to date, and we will be in the future tackling some of those tough policy issues. So if there are no other questions, we'll move on to the operational functions. Approval of the March 2022 claims and question cost. That was sent to you last week in an email by Christie. Are there any questions or motions? Chair Gibbs. They said silence your equipment, so I think we did.
It's not working. Christie, I did have one question on check 767140, healthy communities, 30,000.
Only one screen, so I will look up. What's the 7-6?
767140.
All right.
It'll just take a second. I'm loading up the laser
Well, and the next item also requires we have the interdepartmental budget transfers. Those were in the packet, the approximately 100-plus pages of transfers. A lot of them are fund balance and carrying over grants from one year to the next.
Yeah, and if you do,
I'll just do a quick, if you do a, what is that? Bookends or bookmarks, you'll see we organized them into the ones that say BL. BL is balance left, so in the case, a lot of those are health. We have our health director here. She's closing out a grant. Remember, one thing I just want to remind you, the problem we have with Kayenta, it's like having a calendar. So if you have a calendar for the year, you get a free one from wherever, and you're gonna take a vacation, and your vacation starts the day before Christmas, and you're gonna come back from wherever you're going the January 3rd of the next year, our accounting system can only give you a vacation till December 31st. It doesn't go anywhere else. So you're going to have to go and get a new calendar and say I'm going to go on vacation through this calendar, then I'm going to take this other brand new free calendar for next year and take 3 more days. That's the problem with our data sets. They're independently put in one. So those balanced closeout ones are grants that we're finishing them up, and we actually got more or less than we had budgeted for. So we're just closing out to actual. The BL on those mean that. But that's the reason why you'll see a lot of the carry forwards. We don't have the capacity. It's money that it's in an account that goes on vacation past the end of a year, and we're carrying those forward. So if you go in the bookmarks and you see ones that start with a CF, that's carry forward, those are just the carry forwards. We send them to you because doing a budget transfer, the auditors love them, and then we'll look at almost all of them. So we want to make sure that you're aware of that. It's a thing that we really want to make sure it's audited. And then the ones at the end are new programs. Those are bookmarked with an NP, and those are new grants that we are receiving. So those would be scrolled down at the bottom. So we try to, since there were so many of them, we just tried to make them so they're a little bit easier to understand which are which.
Were there any questions? And this is standard every year. We go through this process. Any questions or motions?
Just tell Laura to get a new calendar.
Are there any other questions? If not, a motion would be in order. Supervisor Fisher?
I'll make the motion to accept the provided budget transfers for this year for this current year.
Is there a second? Seconded by McEwen. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval of the transfers will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
no. That motion carries unanimously. Now we'll go back to the question costs. We truly have question costs.
Okay, it's thinking, so I'm going to give it a few more seconds to think. If you want to go to the next item, oh, here. It is actually a grant for standalone platform license to a company called Conduit Healthy Communities. It's a HCI standalone platform license renewal term for this year through this very start of next year for software. So I think Lori Scuddery just left, but it's a software for one of their,
And it's being paid for out of a grant, Christie?
yes, yep.
All right, all right. Thank you.
Is it part of the well, if Laura were here, we could ask if that was part of the Community Health Improvement Plan process. I think that might be what it's for, but don't hold me to that. But any other questions? If not, what are your wishes relative to the claims and question costs?
Make a motion to approve the claims and question costs for March of 2019, or 2022.
Is there a second? Second by Arstead. We have a motion and second to authorize payment of the claims and question costs. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Tax deed properties, sale of 2021-10, 1202 Bissell Street. It's pulled off, okay, all right. We will then move on to the capital improvement funding of projects for 2022.
You're more than welcome to join us.
The only thing on there would be that if we needed to have any discussion on the borrowing of the 2022 CIP, but that it will be brought back in May for the award.
I think at the last meeting, we discussed whether or not we would reduce the amount of the borrowing to reflect potentially the use of ARPA and other funds. I think that's still under evaluation, so we'll look for an update at our May meeting. So we're looking at possibilities or opportunities. We adopted the resolution at the higher level, and we can reduce it without impact, but we want to make sure that we understand the long-term ramifications of that. All right, consideration, we already did that. Item 5, approval of administration seeking an updated appraisal for county-owned property at 400 East Thomas Street. Administrator Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is really just an update from September of 2020. For those of you all of you were on the committee at that point. We did receive an appraisal for the property we own, the social services building. As you all know, we are looking to relocate social services to the Lakeview campus. And as part of that process, we did seek an appraisal of that real estate. We do have an entity that has expressed interest in the property. There's some concern that the appraisal from September of 2020 no longer accurately reflects the value of that property in light of all things pandemic related and commercial real estate. So in conversations with that party, and I think it's just sound business practice in any event, I indicated that I would come to this committee and simply request your operational approval to go out and get that appraisal. I think it's, again, good business sense. We will be relocating in the next approximately a year from that property, and the county is going to need to make an a determination relative to divestment strategy, so having a more accurate appraisal, in my estimation, is a good practice. So that's the background. If there are any questions, happy to take them, but, excuse me, essentially what I'm asking for is approval to get that appraisal.
Any questions or motions? Chair Gibbs.
So, Administrator Leonard, what was the appraisal back in 2020 on that property? 3 million something?
Sure, the total market value appraisal as of September 9th, 2020 was $3,430,000 for the property.
And as we've seen, I mean, when we were even looking at vacant property, the potential property on another possible location for the Highway Department, we've seen that change significantly from that same period. So I would move that we authorize the administrator to get a updated appraisal value on that property.
Moved by Gibbs, seconded by Fisher. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Next, resolution to increase petty cash balance for the Marathon County Social Services Department from $100 to $500.
Hi, Finance. With that one today, we do have Vicki Tilda and Colleen Kostrowski from the Social Services Department. They have $100 that they use for cash, petty cash, and for change fund, and they would just like to expand that to $500. And the way we do that is by resolution. So when the balance sheet gets audited, we can show the auditor we just put it in their drawer. And so if you have any further questions, both Vicki and Colleen are on the WebEx for you. Otherwise, this would go to county board, and once we get that done, then we'll get them all straightened out with their new or higher limit.
Just question, I know in the past that we've had some questions raised by the auditors relative to petty cash funds. This is, all policies would be consistent with auditing practices and policies, and that's a given, but what are your wishes? Are there any questions or motions? Supervisor Leahy. Moved by Supervisor Leahy to approve the increase in the cash balance fund, seconded by McEwen. Any discussion? If not, all is in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Next, resolution providing for the sale not to exceed $19,225,000 of general obligation healthcare project building bonds 2022B.
This one is for the healthcare center, the project that was approved back in 2018 for the master plan of the healthcare center. This is going to be the phase that does D and E wing. And this is the next set of plans, and the project then will move forward with the borrowing for that section of the facility. This one, the initial resolution was done in 2018, so this one is the next step in that, which is setting the right to sale on those bonds. And then in May, you'll see this is going to be the 2022B. The healthcare center ones are always B. The CIP that you approved in the initial resolution, that will be 2022A, and you'll see that in May.
And again, this is consistent with earlier county board action. What are your wishes? Is this the final phase?
No.
Or is there one
One more.
after this? Okay. Supervisor Fisher.
I'd like to move to accept the resolution providing for the sale not to exceed $19,225,000 GO bonds for the healthcare, NCHC healthcare project.
Moved. Is there a second? Seconded by Leahy. Moved by Fisher, seconded by Leahy to approve the resolution. Any discussion? If not, all is in favor of adoption of the resolution will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Resolution authorizing the redemption of general obligation bond, airport bonds, recovery zone, facility bonds, Series 2010A, dated December 15th, 2010.
Okay, if you didn't think that moving the cash fund from 100 to 500 was too exciting, this is some good news. The airport has, this is an interesting story that I'm going to tell you very quickly. Back in the day when they had the recession after the crash, they created recovery zones. One of the recovery zones was Marathon County. We created an entire recovery zones. But they wanted infrastructure building and build back better bonds and those types of things. Under that, guys, we were able to borrow for the airport for the car rental facility. And those bonds have callable dates. And we are now able to use CARES funding to make debt service payments. We cannot use ARPA funding for that. This is a separate stream that's given to airports so that they can continue as a going concern and all that. Both Brian, the airport manager, and Dave, the office manager, on the phone. But what these will do is allow us to call those back, and those funds will be paid with CARES funding. And that is a good thing because it stops interest and coupon payments for those the series that we have left, which I believe are 2 years.
The CARES Act was the initial response to the pandemic in terms of economic assistance versus the American Rescue Plan, which was a secondary plan. Anything you'd like to add, Brian? Or anyone from?
I did want to, I forgot the most exciting part about when we originally bought these, because there's private activity, because the airlines are there, we have the restaurant and stuff, these are usually called private activity and therefore would be taxable. But because we were a recovery zone, these bonds were sold in a very special, unique manner, and they were non-taxable bonds that should have, in most cases, been taxable. So they actually were a very special issue that we did at the time. And then the next time the federal government tried to help us with infrastructure is now, so they're going to be paid back with CARES funding. So that's the circle for those people that like financial stories. That was my story.
Chair Gibbs.
Make a motion, excuse me, make a motion to authorize the redemption of general obligation airport bond, recovery zone facility bond, series 2010A, dated December 15th, 2010, and move to the full board for its approval.
We move to adopt the resolution and forward it to the board, seconded by Arstead. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of adoption of the resolution will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Policy issues discussion. Consideration of a motion to go into closed session. What are the wishes you'll need? If somebody wants to make that motion, they will need to read it.
I'll make a motion to go into closed session pursuant to state statutes 19.85, parent 1, parent E of the Wisconsin statutes for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other special business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, to wit, for the purpose of permitting the committee to discuss its strategy for negotiating the possible purchase of certain real estate in the city of Wausau adjacent to Marathon, adjacent to the county-owned property.
Is there a second? Any discussion on the motion? McEwen. Thank you. If not, clerk call the roll. Or,
Supervisor Robinson,
aye.
Supervisor Leahy. Aye. Supervisor McEwen,
Aye.
Supervisor Gibbs,
Aye.
Supervisor Zhang,
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher,
Aye.
Supervisor Erstad.
Hi.
So ye will have to, we'll be closing down the WebEx portion of the meeting. You will not be able to participate in this portion of the meeting. We'll let you back in when we go back into open session.
Thank you.